Hey, this is Tim Cummins back with you for my favorite stories from my 50 years on planet Earth. And thank you for coming and checking out Story Tim! Well, I've got a lot of elephant stories, as you may have heard, and that's by far not of all of the stories that I've got about elephants, but you've heard some of my favorites if you've checked out some of the other episodes. But the other thing that happened a lot to me while I was growing up in Africa was about snakes. I was fascinated by snakes. I was the president of our herpetology club at the Nairobi International School and really liked snakes, and actually worked in the Nairobi Snake Park where Richard Leakey was the curator, and so I was allowed to go out there and check out the snakes and stuff like that and work with them. And this story that I want to tell you about was when I was dealing with rock pythons. Well, rock pythons are next to anacondas for being the largest snake on the planet Earth. It was very common to have rock pythons that would be 20, 25 feet long. You would have to have 5 or 6 people carrying them. And I can remember we would go and transport the python from one enclosure to another enclosure. And I always chose to be towards the end of the python because I didn't want any piece of the business at the front end of the python where all the teeth were, you feel me? Now, rock pythons are not venomous. They will not kill you by their teeth, but instead will loop their massive coils around you. And they don't really crush you. What they do is they constrict you, so every time you exhale, breathe out, they squeeze a little bit more so you can't really breathe in. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm for breathing in, and that's how normally they kill you. They've got a very large mouth. Their mouth would be kind of about like this big. Definitely could bite your head. And each of their fangs are maybe about an inch long. They curve back, but they're not really, pythons don't really have really strong fangs, so if they actually bit you and you pulled real hard, the fangs would actually come out, or the teeth would actually come out in your arm. So not a really good thing. You could imagine like having 15 curved hypodermic needles embedded in your arm as you eject out. Well, anyway, as a kid, I was about in 8th grade now, when I was working in the Nairobi Snake Park. We had just moved about 8 of the largest rock pythons into their new enclosure. It was during the summertime. Now, you know, Kenya doesn't have really summer or winter. We really have just a dry season and a rainy season. Really the driest, hottest time in East Africa is December. That's when we always would go down to the beach. But anyway, it was around December, and I was at the Nairobi Snake Park working inside this big python enclosure, which was probably about, I don't know, 30 feet by 40 feet. Pretty big size thing, made of rocks and stuff like this. And my job was to clean up the pool, so I'd like scrubbed it with a broom and stuff, and then to fill it up with the hose. Well, I'd cleaned it and now I was filling it up with the hose. Well, the water pressure wasn't all that great in Nairobi and anything, so, you know, I was filling up with the hose. Well, being a kid, you know, I'm like, I'm getting kind of bored over here. And there was a big pile of probably 6 of these very large rock pythons over to my right-hand side. Well, being hot, I took the water hose and I took it and I sprayed it on them, say, hey, you know, try to cool them off, you know, I'm a nice guy, but Tim's such a good guy, you know, and they were all looking at me like, hissing like that, and I'm thinking, well, maybe this wasn't the best idea, this spraying them with the water. So I went back to, water, filling up the pond, I'm getting a little bored again, so I'm looking over to the side, hey, check out the snakes, you know, so I think I'm gonna spray them again, cool them off, because they're so hot. So I sprayed them off again. They're looking at me like, you know, and again, you kind of get frightened when you get 6 or 7 snakes that are just 20 foot long hissing at you. But after a while, you're like, oh, okay, well, so I'm filling up the pool again, filling up the pool. Well, the 3rd time, I decided I was going to spray them down one more time good, because it was hot, and I was a nice guy. So I sprayed them down again, and they're like looking at me like, they're hissing and stuff like this. So I said, well, maybe this isn't the best plan, you know. So I went back, and as I turned my back, I saw out of the corner of my eye something coming towards me, and I moved to the side, and this snake head, and again, the snake head is about like this big, like bigger than my head, you know, and it lunged right beside me, and its head went right beside my arm, like zip, like this, and I went, ah, and I threw the hose down and, you know, threw it up in the air and ran as fast as my little legs could carry me out that door to get out of there, and slammed the door behind me, and decided I'd let one of the other Africans go in there and finish that job because them snakes had plenty of meat. So at least I wasn't snake food, because at my side, being 8th grade, one of those snakes could have eaten me completely whole, and it would have just made one big bulge in there. But fortunately, I was able to avoid the snake grab, and that's another story time.